Hey guys, the quiz on Monday will be over the vertebral column, a single vertebrae, and the thoracic cage or rib cage. So let's look at this first. The very first thing you need to know is the name of the first and second vertebrae. So the first one, if I were there, you could pretend like you are Atlas, where you put your arms out, and remember Atlas has the world on his shoulders. So that is like you having your head on top of this. So the first cervical vertebrae is called Atlas. And then shake your head no. By doing this, the second cervical vertebrae is called axis, and it enables you to turn your head like that. Okay, while we're still up here in the neck region, I want to go over the names of the different regions and how many are in each. Okay, the very first one, which you already know. Think about anyone who's been in a car accident and had some kind of whiplash. They wear a cervical collar. So this is called the cervical region. And you can please go ahead and read that one in your book. But this one has 7 vertebrae, okay, in the cervical region. The next is the thoracic region, which is the chest area, and this is composed of 12 vertebrae. So you'll need to memorize those numbers. The next region is the lumbar region. This is easy to remember. You think about anyone that has to lift things, like if they work at Home Depot or something like that, then they wear one of those lumbar belts. And this is made of only 5 vertebrae, the lumbar region. The last one, you don't have to know how many because they're fused together, but I do want you to know the sacrum. And if you get the vertebral column out, you can see it's kind of heart-shaped. Our vertebral column is missing the tailbone, but the other name for the tailbone is coccyx. So make sure you can spell that, coccyx. You may have heard of someone who broke their coccyx while giving birth. That is not unheard of. If it curves anteriorly too much, sometimes that happens. Okay, let's go to the next screen. This is the same picture that you will have on your quiz. You do not have to know every single one of these, but let me show you the ones I do want you to know. Sorry, it's cut off a little bit. Let me go back, sorry. If you think about this, this is showing you that this is the posterior and this is the anterior, and you're looking down on the vertebrae. If you feel the back, if you feel your spine, they feel like rounded bumps, but that's just because there is connective tissue on top of these little pokey outy things that when you're looking at the skeleton, if you're looking at Fred and you feel these, it looks kind of like a stegosaurus. But these processes are called spinous process. So that's easy to remember. I am not going to ask you about the facet. That's where one articulates with another. I am not going to ask you the lamina or the pedicle, but you do need to know that the main part that is weight bearing here is called the body. I also want you to know that these structures that stick out to the side right here are called, this one is called the transverse process, And you can just think about that sticking out laterally, and that helps make sense. And then the last thing I want you to know is this hole right here. You can realize what goes through it. Your spinal cord goes through this, and any kind of opening like that is known as a foramen. So say that, foramen. And this one is the vertebral foramen. And you can just remember that that protects the spinal cord. Okay. The rest of these you do not have to know, but let's run through it again. The posterior process is called the spinous process. The ones that stick out to the side, transverse process. The hole that the spinal cord runs through is the vertebral foramen, and the weight-bearing part of your spine, backbone, vertebral column, is called a body. While we're on this, make sure that you always differentiate. The spinal cord is nervous tissue. The spinal column, vertebral column, backbone, that is all part of the skeletal system. All those terms mean the same thing, but spinal cord is nervous. Okay, you do not have to know which ones come from where. So we'll just run through these. This just shows you a close-up of the sacrum and coccyx, but you do not have to know the particular processes. Okay, now this is the next thing that will be on Monday's quiz, the thoracic cage or rib cage. So let's start at the top. If you feel right at the base of your neck, you can actually feel what is known as the jugular notch. So that is this little curved area right here. So you can feel that on yourself. It is right above your sternum. Everybody knows your sternum. When you do chest compressions, when you learn that in CPR, then you make sure that you come all the way up from the bottom. You remember you've heard that before, where you go a couple of fingers up. That's so you don't break off this xiphoid process and pierce the tissue underneath. So you always come up and put the heel of your hand on the body. But let's learn the three parts of the sternum. The whole thing is known as sternum, and the three parts are: one, manubrium, which is this area right here. You can see that. Then the main part of it here is the body. And then the last little part down here that on our box of bones, you can see that it has kind of an irregular shape, and that is known as the xiphoid process. So 1, manubrium, 2, body, and 3, xiphoid process. If you're asking for the three parts that made up the sternum, those are the three parts. Clavicle is just another name for collarbone. Then I do want you to know the three types of ribs. You can see that ribs 1 through 7 are known as true ribs. Goes from here all the way down, and those are the true ribs. 8 through 12 are known as the false ribs, and that's just because they extend off. You can see down here that they're off of an extension that doesn't connect to the sternum. So those are referred to the false ribs. And then if you look on the very back, the ones that do not continue around anteriorly are known as floating ribs. Okay, so those are the terms that you need to know for the rib cage or thoracic cage: jugular notch, manubrium, body, and xiphoid process all make up the sternum, and then make sure you can label the true ribs, false ribs, and floating ribs. I don't think I will ask you to label this, but you can see on Fred that this area of white here is actually cartilage, which is more flexible than the bone. So that's something interesting to note. Okay, that's it for Monday's quiz. Good luck.